Hey everyone, I'm Patrick Jones, and welcome to episode 82 of That Gives Me Anxiety, part 2 on artificial intelligence. I don't know why, but my brain wanted to say American independence. 4th of July is coming up, and I was thinking right before this that I gotta start coming up with what we want to do, right? But that's not right. It's on artificial intelligence. Coming off a long weekend here. Did a performance at Theater 99, went to the beach. We went to the beach here, one of the more like touristy beaches. It's night and day going to a tourist beach versus like where the locals go, which is much quieter. It's a lot less relaxing when there's just everyone's everywhere. But still, the beaches here in Charleston are gorgeous, so really can't complain. Well, yeah, like I said, this is part 2 of Artificial Intelligence, where I spoke with Kathleen Walch and Ron Schmelzer, who are both managing directors at Cognilytica, and they're also both hosts at the AI Today podcast. And yeah, just use the interview time to chat with them about different aspects of how AI works and where the problems are and what the government might do to try to put checks and balances on companies. And then in this episode, we also talked about the potential of Terminator like AI coming to fruition, which is fun. It is fun, but also, it's terrifying. But before we get to the interview, I just want to remind you, if you're liking the show, please remember to rate and review it. 5 stars, whatever platform, right? There's some platforms I've never heard of that people download this show from, which is, put 5 stars on those platforms. You can check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Don't forget the partnership with Pure Spectrum CBD and the promo code AnxietyPod, one word, for 15% off. And also, if you want to make a tip or donation to the show, you can do so through the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is also in the description. So yeah, let's jump right into part 2 of Artificial Intelligence. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy. You touched on something that I also wanted to ask you guys about, and it's sort of like automated vehicles, right? There's such an easy line of jokes about, you see on Facebook memes of people talking about like Tesla crashing and all that. But I mean, it's so crazy to think that a car can drive me from here to wherever I want to go. I'm curious, like, do you know anyone that's working in that space or like know of the space, and how confident are they that could one day be our reality? It just seems so complicated with so many variables.
It is.
Yeah. We have definitely had a lot of conversations with those people. We've interviewed them on our podcast. And the interesting thing is that some of them are overly, they have overconfidence.
Oh, yeah.
It actually turns out it is one of the hardest problems. As we say, the 7 patterns of AI, the autonomous pattern is the most difficult because we're trying to get the human out of the loop. What you want is you want a system to perform flawlessly, ideally, in the face of all the randomness that's the world. And that's what our brain is just so good at, although we get into plenty of accidents ourselves. Yeah. But there's less, for many reasons, there's less tolerance for a machine to have an accident, even if it's one out of, for every 10,000 human accidents, there's a machine accident. That machine accident will get all the press. The other ones will probably not. The human ones, because we're like, well, yeah, humans are fallible. We're like, this is just like, that's how we are. We're not perfect. We're not machines, right? So we want to slice both sides of that apple there, where it's like, yeah, we want to have the machine, be perfect, but we want it to do all the human things too. There's a couple notable researchers in the space. Rodney Brooks, as I said, my former undergraduate advisor, he is not a believer in autonomous vehicles. He thinks we're way far off, that people are overly optimistic about it. He's like, let's try to do some of the other patterns and other things at first. Then you have people like Elon Musk from Tesla, who's been promising full self-driving for like years, well ahead of schedule, maybe to sell subscriptions to a server. Who knows what the thing is, or maybe he's a believer in it, which is great. Hey, we're putting people in space and going to Mars. So, those are things that are also pretty technically difficult to do. So are we closer or farther away? I think that is a little bit of an elusive goal. A lot of people thought that we were going to have a large amount of autonomous vehicles on the road, definitely by now, if not actually a few years ago. There was the thought we were going to have 3 million autonomous vehicles on the road. And also countries were getting caught up in it. They were actually creating laws, regulations to either allow autonomous vehicles or provide something. Meanwhile, the dark horse of large language models was sneaking around. Nobody was paying any attention to that. That came almost out of nowhere. And you're like, wow, we were caught off guard. We sort of like we're paying attention to one thing and not paying
Yeah,
attention.
look over here. Look up like a baby that you're trying to trick. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and in doing research for this discussion, I came across discussions related to, so let's say an autonomous vehicle has to make a choice between hitting a baby carriage and crashing into another car. I mean, you have to write it down to that level of detail, and you can't plan for every scenario, right? It's just, there's an existential discussion in every corner here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also your training system so that it's making that decision in real time, just like a human would have to make that decision in real time. And so that's also what's difficult about it. And this is why it's so data hungry, because you need to give it all that data. And kind of going back to your last question with where are we kind of with AGI, that idea of the superhuman, most intelligent machine. And it needs to be able to do all of this, be able to do all of the patterns of AI well. And we, like I said earlier, we just have those narrow applications. So autonomous vehicles, that's just the autonomous pattern. And the large language models, that's just our conversational pattern. So even though they are incredible and doing really powerful things, it's just still one application of AI. I can't ask ChatGPT to drive my car.
Right.
And and so these are kind of, it's like it needs to all be interconnected. And that's where things become even more difficult. So back when we started autonomous vehicles, I was really bullish on. I wanted it because I don't like driving. And I was like, this would be wonderful.
It sounds so comfortable. Yeah, I'm with you.
But it's really difficult. And they kind of say that last mile of delivery is always the hardest, to get from that last mile to the customer's door, because there's so many different things, right? You're driving through cities, doing all that, being in areas maybe with tall buildings, there's not good GPS. And that's really difficult.
Yeah. It also seems like if tomorrow none of us had cars and we were all on this one AI driven system, it could plan for variables a little bit easier, right? If it could talk to other, and this is just me saying this, so I don't know if it's actually true.
That makes a lot of sense. That's sort of the whole smart city, connected systems idea, and that actually does make a lot of sense, because it's like, yeah, I mean, to the baby carriage example, hey, if the baby carriage could talk to the car, that would be the answer to your problem. You wouldn't have to make a decision, because baby carriage could say, I'm a baby carriage, don't run me over. But it's sort of like there's a lot of technical complexity in making a lot of that work. But there is this movement to smart cities. Sort of the irony of all this is that we had a lot of this stuff way back in the 1930s. We had streetcars. I know it's crazy, but like we got rid of all of our streetcars. There's a whole, not conspiracy, but there's a whole conversation about that's kind of conspiratorial about how the bus companies tried to drive the streetcar companies out of business, and so now we don't have any streetcars. But we had some pretty if you wanted an autonomous experience, you just get on a streetcar. That's sort of how it worked. But we had the growth of, there's like all this stuff that connects. We had the growth of suburbs. One of the things that we talked about was like, well, if everybody did have an autonomous vehicle, would you actually need a garage, right? And in which case, would you even need to own a car? Because would it even matter if you owned a car? Then it kind of moves this whole like, well, you can be a renter, and then if you don't need a garage, your garage could basically be a delivery port, or it could be. And
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, it would again change the fundamental nature of the city, which is basically what cars did. So it's just interest. You get into these interesting conversations, and you're right to think about it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk? I know you've got a lot on your plate. You've got work, you've got friends, you've got family, pets, you've got the people that you make small talk with at the coffee shop or gym. You've got that bird that you see when you wake up every morning outside your window that you've projected things onto. Look at that bird. Doesn't even love its family. It's always by itself. You do that. Everyone does that. Point is, you've got a lot on your plate. Well, that's why there's Instacart, to take a little bit off your plate. Using Instacart, you search for all your favorite foods and things that you need from the grocery store, all online, all while you're looking at that bird, wondering why it hasn't called its mom. And they deliver it to you. They go to the store and do the shopping for you. And they can deliver it in as fast as an hour. And you can sign up by clicking the link in the description, wherever you're listening or watching. And that's a great way of supporting the show. So it's a great way of supporting this show. It's a great way to make your life a little bit easier, because we all know that you have so much going on, like wondering whether that bird judges you back. So before we get to the Terminator discussions, there have been recent, I guess, debates, what we'll call them, in front of the government. And some of the suggestions have been putting limits on AI, or sort of like watchdogs. It's even been suggested by some CEOs. I'm curious, I don't have access to someone like you guys all the time. What are your guys' thoughts on whether or not we should be looking at AI companies, or are there common sense laws that should be enacted?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we talk about this too. What we say is that laws for any emerging technology, laws always take time to catch up with the technology. And in some sense, you want them to, because you want to see how people are using that technology and then build laws around that, not build laws and then let people work around them. So we bring up cell phones, for example, and cell phones had been around for a few decades before laws were in place about hands-free driving and things like that, because they wanted to see how people were using cell phones, what distracted driving did, and then how do you fix that, right? And so you put laws in place to help fix with distracted driving. The same works for AI. How are people using it? And then what do we need to actually regulate when it comes to AI? And these are challenging topics. But it's nice that it's actually being brought to the forefront now, and that people are having these discussions around ethics as well. And, the ethical and responsible use of AI, transparency when it comes to AI. What data is being used? How is it being used? How is it being collected? Do you have the right to be forgotten? Europe and China, the United States, we all have different kind of philosophies on this. Europe is the most strict. China is the most loose with these laws, and the US falls somewhere in between. So you look at how others are doing it too. And then sometimes by default, regional laws become de facto laws, because if we're dealing with multinational organizations, they need to be in compliance, or if data is stored in those locations, they need to be in compliance. So we always say, look at it from a holistic standpoint. When we originally started, and we're asking, does AI matter, and all of that, we looked to some of the luminaries in the field, and Nick Bostrom had said, you can't just unplug the internet. So you're not just going to be able to unplug this. It's already out there. It's already being used. So how do we make sure we're using it in a responsible way? We always have been big proponents, keep humans in the loop. And years ago, we were talking about this idea of augmented intelligence, where you're taking the AI and you're using it to help make humans better, but not to replace them. And that just helps you do your job better. So you're able to do more, maybe with the resources that you have. You're able to do your job more efficiently. It can be a second set of eyes to double check things. We think about accountants, for example. Well, if you might not know all of the accounting rules, but if you're able to have this augmented intelligence that helps you with it as you're plugging in the data, it can say, hey, in this state, there's this rule, or this just passed. Are you following this? Kind of using it as a guide and a second set of eyes. And we always say, make sure you're doing that. There are discussions, though, about AI in general and how is it being used. Is it going to cause kind of mass unemployment, at least in certain industries and regions? And what can we do that you should not be building these systems so that it does create that mass unemployment? And how do you make sure that we are still doing this in that ethical and responsible way?
Easing into the pool and not jumping in, right? Just
right.
if you can see it coming.
Beach access, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and these laws, it's interesting because like our perspective on it, and Kathleen mentioned this very early on, we have fears and concerns, and they're not actually the same thing. Fears tend to be more emotional, like I'm afraid of losing my job, or I'm afraid of machines getting so intelligent that we can't control them, or I'm afraid of companies hoarding too much data. And it's like a fear because your fear may not be the same as my fear. They're kind of like they're at these levels, right? Maybe I'm worried about it, but you're not worried about it. But there are also legitimate concerns, which are things like violations of privacy, bad actors doing bad things, people doing things like deepfakes. Okay, these are actual, you could say this can happen. And if this does happen, what do we do with it? Laws are, it's harder to deal with the fears. It's easier to deal with the concerns. And I think we're kind of at right now at the where we are with AI because it's been so democratized. It's just so easy for people to get access to it that probably the more immediate fear is either intentional or unintentional misuse of the technology. A lot of bad actors doing bad things. There have already been now many cases of people being scammed out of money using deepfake audio. You probably heard a few of those cases, or like emails basically saying, hey, I need something. And it's like I would say at this point in your life, don't believe everything you hear, see, or read. Just you know, just
Yeah.
everything with, and it's hard because it sort of goes against our experience, and especially older folks. I'm sorry to say it. They're the ones that tend to be the most victims because they tend to trust what they hear and see, and we're like, no, don't do that. So.
Yeah. I guess it's one of those things that someone who's born today would be, their bullshit meter would be a little bit more in tune with this than us or someone older than us. Yeah. So we got to protect ourselves out there.
Trust no one. Yeah. And I think that that's interesting. There's been a pendulum that's been swinging for a while. In the 30s and 40s, in 1940s, we used to trust the government a lot because the big New Deal and the World War II. And then we basically got to the 60s and the hippie were like, don't trust the government. They're lying to you. And like you should trust us and you should trust corporations. And like, whoa, that pendulum is spinning back. Now actually more people trust the government than trust corporations. It's like if I said, do you trust, would say, the US government, or do you trust Apple? Who do you trust more? Or Facebook? Oh my God, you bring it, or Meta. Like, no.
Yeah. Or Amazon. Yeah.
But who has the power? And I think this is one of those, this is actually an anxiety moment. And maybe even for me, sometimes personal anxiety, which is sometimes you feel hopeless. Yeah, I'm not hopeless. You feel powerless. Like a situation
Absolutely.
where literally faceless, Google could decide tomorrow to cancel your account, basically say terms of service violated, and you have zero recourse. You legit have, and then all of a sudden you're like, I got access to nothing. So if you've been living your life on Google, which is a danger, that's almost like a privilege. And
Oh God, I'm gonna have a nightmare. I'm gonna have like a fever dream about that tonight.
I don't mean to be causing anxiety here, but like that is a concern because there is no recourse, right? There's like, it's not like the government, because if the government were to do that, you could get an advocate, you can get a lawyer, you can go in there and say, you denied me services, I need those services back. Google, Uber, your credit card company decide to deny you services, that is the end of the road. You cannot make them give you those services back.
And it's like anything that comes out in the future, right? It's in perpetuity.
Right.
That's difficult to imagine. Yeah. Just you look at people who don't have even an iPhone versus, any other phone. Those people are like left out, right? Like seemingly like people are, yeah, it's crazy.
It kind of makes you, I mean, for those people who are aware of it, it basically makes you want to say, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't put so many eggs in this basket here.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Good point.
you Google myself, spread myself out a little bit, keep some backup.
Although sometimes it is hard to get alternatives.
Yes.
At least ones you like.
Yeah. One of life's mysteries is that birthdays always find me unprepared, catch me unprepared. I don't go on Facebook as much, so I don't notice them as much. But I want to express my love and appreciation for friends and family. That wasn't part of the copy. I'm just saying it. Year after year, month after month. Even when I see it coming, I'm not ready. Am I a jerk? Yes and no. Why do things have to be so black and white for you? But I've got great news, friends. Introducing monthly card subscriptions from the Cardist Studio. Join the service that delivers the card and the stamp that you'll need to your door. No more errands. Who wants more errands? I don't know why, but I'm starting to think of Aaron's as a kid's name. Aaron's, go back to bed. Okay, but here's how it works. You choose your categories, from birthdays and celebrations to love and encouragement, or select their full collections and have those thank you notes and just because cards at the ready. Those ones are always so nice. Like when you get a card for doing something and it's just like a small little heads up or token of appreciation, it genuinely makes you feel really good. And best of all, you would never get caught cardless again. Let me repeat, you'll never get caught cardless again. Try to say that a bunch of times in a row. You'll never get caught cardless again. Monthly card subscriptions from as little as $8 per month for the card and the stamp. Delivered to you. TheCardistStudio.com shop subscriptions. And you can use the promo code AnxietyPod for 15% off your originating order. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about the Terminator AI. And, the sense I'm getting from you guys is AI is like a baby deer, right? Still got the new legs, just trying to figure itself out. But let's pretend down the road. Is it conceivably possible that an AI could overtake humans?
Yes, because anything's possible, right?
Sure.
But it depends on how fast we're evolving and what we're doing. The technology is evolving and kind of those guardrails that we put in place, and can we put them in place? So, yes, anything is possible, but I think that a lot more people are thinking and talking about this topic than they have in the past. And, like I said, we've been talking to people since 2017. The conversations that we've had have evolved tremendously. And also, there's been much more emphasis in the past few years on that ethical and responsible use of AI than there was in the past. So I think that people were really just trying to push the needle forward, see what they could do. Because, and this has been pretty revolutionary if you think about it. About a decade ago, we really did not have systems that could understand voice very well. Now we do. That was an incredibly hard problem to solve. And now in many different languages, all of this stuff, it's really evolved and come a long way. But you need to see, again, I talked about that idea of artificial general intelligence versus narrow AI. We still are in narrow AI. So we're able to just do one of those 7 patterns very well, but not be able to combine them to do all 7 very well to get this intelligent machine that can mimic human behavior, let alone take over and be even better than humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sort of the idea of the super intelligence, at least the ones that Nick Bostrom talks about, also in the idea of the singularity. And I'm blanking on the name of the fellow. Oh, I should know this. He also did synthesizers. Anyway, Kurzweil, Ray Kurzweil. Thank you very much. So he wrote this idea of the singularities. At some point, the machines will sort of learn how to learn, I guess, and because of that little self-fulfilling loop, it will be impossible to do anything, because they will be able to, the moment you try to turn off the machine, it'll be already 10 steps ahead of you. It'll be like preventing you from preventing you can't even
I'm afraid I can't let you do that, right? From Space Odyssey.
Exactly. Now we have the thing that we haven't figured out is, like, we call this the DIKUW pyramid. It's not our own. You can actually Wikipedia this. It's the idea that we have to solve layers of problems. It's like an onion or a parfait, if you're Shrek, where it's like the bottom of the layer is we need to solve data problems. We've already figured that out. That was big data, the big data movement. We got that, check. The next layer is I, which is information, which is trying to make the connections between the data, try to figure out what the patterns are. We figured that out with business intelligence systems and that sort of stuff. Then the next level is called K, knowledge levels, which is finding those patterns, those outliers. That's actually where we are right now. That's the machine learning thing. But then the next layer is understanding, which is understanding what those patterns are. This is actually where systems are not very good. You can have a conversation with Alexa, but it doesn't actually really understand. The thing even about ChatGPT, which is why it's still got problems. This is how we know we're still safe. This is how we know we're still safe from the singularity. Someone told us it's like when Alexa can tell you a good joke, you're in trouble because it needs to understand it. Even ChatGPT is really a fancy parrot. That's the way we like to say it. What it's doing is it's really trying to predict. It's like a fancy text completion engine. It just tries to predict what the next thing is. And the whole basis of ChatGPT has been trained on the whole corpus of the internet, which is like all the text in the internet. There's something called Common Crawl, which is apparently an open source, freely crawled index of the internet, some ridiculous amount of petabytes.
Yeah.
But out there, some research organization did it. Thank you very much, Skynet. And
Yeah.
anyway, they did that for us, and so they trained it on that, and so because it knows how humans typically would respond to something, it's giving you that response, and it's combining multiple of them together, which is why sometimes you get a little bit of a fruit salad, and it's combining things in a weird way, but it doesn't actually understand. So you can't say, why did you say that? Like, why did you respond that way? It's going to try to text complete that. It's like, well, this is how I think you want that answer, but it doesn't actually really understand it. Because of that, it doesn't have what's called common sense. Self-driving vehicles will still stop and think there's a wall when there's like a heavy downpour of water, because it's perceiving blockage, but it doesn't understand that you can drive through that. And then it goes, why can I drive through rain, but I can't drive through person or wall?
Yeah, man. That's that is an interesting aspect to connect the dots on that. Not something that I had considered. But yeah, guys, this conversation has been awesome. You've been so generous with your time. I don't want to take up too much more of it. I'm wondering if there's anything that you think is vital to sort of an initial discussion for AI or anxiety related to it.
Yeah, I think just having conversations and continuing to play with the technology yourself and understand what technology you're using is AI enabled. I think that that's going to help allay a lot of fears. I think that people won't be as scared if they say, "Oh, look at this, okay, my GPS is using it." Also, we've put together a robust reading list, and we can share the link to that as well, which I encourage your listeners to check out, because it gives them the opportunity. Some of the books that we discussed here today are on that list. And so it gives them the opportunity to really just kind of dig a little bit deeper and ask these questions for themselves. Also, if they want to listen to our podcast, we have these, what is AI? Why does AI matter? We revisit those on some of our anniversary podcasts as well, just to say, has anything changed? What's the landscape? And why is this important?
Yeah. So basically, the funny thing is, anything that you've thought about with AI, I guarantee you there have been many other people have thought about it before, which is great. Doesn't mean that they have all the right answers, but there are people have been thinking about it. And I'd say maybe end on an interesting, I don't want to end this podcast, but say conclude in an interesting place, which is that, as Kathleen mentioned, AI is as old as computing. Actually, it's a little bit older than computing. You're like, what? How is artificial intelligence older than the computer? Well, Alan Turing, who is the fellow who invented the first he was the progenitor of the first programmable machine. The whole Turing machine came out of the project to crack the code with the Enigma, and basically built this computer called the La Bomba, or whatever, the bomb, at Bletchley Lab. And he was also the same Turing who came up with the Turing test, right? And so the idea was that they first wanted to say, can we make machines intelligent? What do we need to make machines intelligent? I know, let's invent the computer. And actually, it came up that way. And we've been sort of chasing this idea, chasing this sort of dream of the intelligent machine for many, many years, with both the opportunities and the dangers. And I think one of the great things about this is that it is well within our reach. It's well within our grasp to not only understand sort of what the possibilities are, but also what the dangers are and what the limits are. And that, fortunately for us, so many people have been talking about this, that as long as we are sort of keeping in sight that kind of where we really are with AI, which is we still have a long way to go, then I think hopefully people can sort of keep their anxieties in check. But I would keep the companies, let's say, keep those corporations, keep them on guard.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, such a pleasure having you guys on. Just before I let you go, I'm wondering if there's any social media that you would want to shout out so people could get a hold of you.
Sure. We're always available on LinkedIn. You can find me at Kathleen Walch. And we love when people reach out to us. So please do, if you have any questions, want to dig deeper into any of these topics.
Yeah, you can go to aitoday.live. That's our short code for this site that goes right to the podcast. Also has our reading list there and all sorts of good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And yeah, fun conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Since doing these interviews, I've been paying closer attention to like where AI actually is already in our lives. It touches a lot of things. But that's okay. I mean, so far it's really helpful. Until it's not. Well, thank you so much to Kathleen and Ron. Definitely check out their podcast if you want to keep learning about AI. The link is in the description. Before I get to the weird thing causing me anxiety this week, I want to remind you of the Buy Me a Coffee link. It's a way to make a donation. Any amount is always appreciated. Then there's Pure Spectrum CBD offering the promo code AnxietyPod for 15% off. And the Carter Studio also offers the promo code AnxietyPod, one word, for 15% off your first order. And then if you want to sign up for home delivery of groceries, you can do so through Instacart. You don't need to be running around. Have the groceries come to you. And by signing up for Instacart through the link in the description, you would be telling Instacart that this show sent you, which also helps support the show. All right, weird thing causing me anxiety this week. Jamie wanted to go see the Little Mermaid. You know, the Disney's doing all these like remakes where they make things like live action looking versus their cartoons. And Jamie was saying how the Little Mermaid was her favorite as a little girl, so she wanted to see what they did, right? Does that explain away why I was there? Grown man without a daughter. Yeah, I have anxiety admitting to that. But whatever. Fiance wants to go, you go. I mean, you know, I drag her to things that she doesn't want to go to. I even like the movie. I mean, there are some bangers in The Little Mermaid. Under the Sea, it's a jam. It's an absolute jam. But for some reason, driving there to the movie theater, I was getting anxious that I was going to have to be like in the seat for the length of the movie and not able to check my phone. And like, what if I get an emergency? It's like so silly because it's like, I just go outside if it was an emergency. I'm just going to be stressed that an emergency may happen. Like that's no, I can't do this. It's too much. So yeah, I tried to use some breathing techniques and some, I forget what it's called, but when you start to pay attention to your surroundings, sort of ground yourself a bit. And that was helpful. But geez, it's like, you're going to see a movie. You should just enjoy yourself and get lost in the story. But we're working towards that. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.